Reclaim your rhythm. Rethink the rules. Rewrite your life. This is Wildly Intentional, the show where we question the scripts we've inherited and build a life, family, and legacy on purpose. If you're done living on autopilot, come with a curious mind and a courageous heart. Here, we talk about what it means to question, unlearn, create, and build what truly matters. I'm your host, Mandy, maverick mom of 3, maker, family culture builder, lifelong question asker, and the friend people call when they're ready to rethink, well, everything. I'm here to shake the norms, tell the truth, and light the way forward. Hey there, wild one. Welcome back. What does it look like to unlearn your way home? Especially when you were raised in a world that gave you all the rules, but none of the permission. Hey, if you're new here, I'm really glad you pressed play. Someone probably sent you this episode because they know you're curious, creative, and maybe even questioning where you fit in a world that's changing fast. And if you've been with me for a while, thank you. You're the reason this space exists. Seriously, this community grows because people like you keep showing up, thinking deeply, and choosing to live with more intention. In today's Out Loud and On Purpose episode, I'm joined by Emily Reuschel, a former educator turned soul expansion coach and the host of the Wild and Waking podcast. Emily's work guides rural women, dreamers, leaders, and changemakers through the sacred journey of remembering who they were before the world told them who to be. When I first came across Emily's work, it felt kind of like finding a soul twin on the internet. Another rural-raised woman with wild in her brand name. A story rooted on learning, evolving, and choosing purpose on purpose. And yet our energy feels very different here. Hers is big and bright and bold. While I feel like I come from a quieter, more serious, reflective place. And yet there's something about the way she shows up. So bold and visible and out loud. It really made me pause. And it's made me curious. Not just about her story, but about the places in myself that are still waiting to stretch and shine in that way. Because I can feel this urgency and passion in me that's been mostly hiding behind the mic. And there's more I want to say about that and more that I want to show. So stick with me and my goal is to get there by January. Because I know I'm being called to stretch into that, to let myself be seen in new ways for me. And I really admire that about Emily. So this conversation, it's both a mirror and a moment for me. We talk about what it means to evolve beyond expectation, especially for women in rural or traditional spaces, and how curiosity, intuition, and community can become powerful pathways toward living a life that actually fits. We explore embodiment, pregnancy as a portal, honoring home while breaking rules, and the rural revolution quietly unfolding inside women everywhere. This episode is especially for the rooted seekers longing for depth and meaning, the curious unlearners bravely rethinking what they've inherited, and the wild blends weaving together intuition and intellect to build lives that actually fit. Let's get into it. Emily, thank you so much. I've really been looking forward to this conversation with you. When I first found you, I had just launched Wildly Intentional, and I feel like you and I have walked very similar paths in so many ways. So I'm excited to kind of get into that today with you. But
I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, we share rural roots, we share breaking expectations and waking up to something deeper. And I'm just really honored to get to have you on the podcast today and to hear more of your story. So thank you for joining me, Emily.
Absolutely. Thank you for welcoming me here.
Yeah. So when I first found you, your podcast was called Gather and Growth. And now it's called Wild and Waking.
Mhm.
Would you talk to me about just like your journey? What shifted for you? Like, how did you start and where are you now? Like, what got you there?
Absolutely. Okay, so it's funny, we were just talking about this before we hit record, which is always how it goes. But I want to scroll back to 2019. So I was postpartum with my second child, had my first in 2017, had historically been an elementary school teacher, and then spent a few years in the nonprofit space, which is where I found myself in this period of time. And I would say, and I think a lot of listeners might identify with this, that for most of my life, I defined my worth by checking all of the boxes,
Mhm.
right? It's like kind of the script that we were handed in childhood, in adolescence, in our high school, college years, right? Go to college, do all the things, get a good job, get married, have babies, live happily ever after. And I had done all of that. I had changed careers multiple times. I was doing work that was really fulfilling. Had brought two kids into the world. My husband and I live in on his family farm in West Central Illinois. We had bought land, we had bought a house. And so, by all metrics of how we would define success, everything was, perfect. Not to say there weren't good days, hard days, everything in between, but like I'd done it. And I had this moment of realization when she was 6 months old, holding her, realizing just how burnt out I was. And of course, at the time, I didn't have the language for that, but I definitely had the realization of I'm so far on the back burner, I'm not even in the kitchen anymore. Like I am bleeding out trying to be a good mom, a good wife, a good employee, like a good, person in the community, just trying to do all of the things to be good. Um, and several years later, could go back and identify of like addiction to approval, achievement, and accolades was ultimately running my life. And it came from this place of really not knowing myself, not loving myself, not trusting myself. And so in that moment, holding her, I had the realization that I would be devastated if she felt about herself the way that I did in that moment.
Mhm.
I'm the product of 90s and 2000s diet culture. I've tried to elliptical myself skinny, all the things. And I'm like, I don't care about that anymore. I have no energy. I'm pouring everything for everyone. I'm coming home at the end of the day, angry and frustrated that my kids are even existing. I'm not that I don't love them deeply, but I'm just so freaking tired.
Mhm.
And so it was immediately after that that I started a health journey rooted in love instead of shame and getting curious around how does different movement make me feel? How do drinking water, how does different foods make me feel? And it was the first time that I really got curious around what does intentionality look like? And what can I do beyond what I ever thought possible? I went from being the opposite of a runner to running a half marathon, right? I started just doing all of these things and proving to myself ultimately that I could trust myself and that I had the agency to decide how I wanted to feel and spend my time and energy on a day-to-day basis. And not that I had never done anything intentionally, right? But not in a way that really mattered to me, not in a way that wasn't on someone else's agenda. So that journey brought me into the world of personal growth and development. This was like the height of the Rachel Hollis era, right?
Okay.
I'm getting super established in all of these Facebook groups and following all these people online related to goals and habits and personal growth and reading all of these books. And it just feels like someone is turning the lights on of like, oh my gosh, there is such a big world out here. And I get to choose what this looks like. But as that's kind of growing and becoming a huge part of my identity, and I'm doing a lot of work in defining who I want to be, I'm also trying to figure out who I am as this relatively new farm wife living in a town of 43 people in a very rural community, 45 minutes from the grocery store. And so I'm starting to also kind of follow, I guess you could say, like women in ag, rural kind of influencers, and trying to define who I am in relation to what I'm seeing there. And at the time, I didn't see any intersection between the two of this world of personal growth and development, intentionality, habits, like talking about different types of parenting, like kind of rewriting cycles and patterns, and then also what it meant to be a woman in a small town rural community. And so very much had this like driving home at sunset moment of like, why not me? Why not me? Like, what would any sane person do in the middle of a pandemic besides start an Instagram account? And so I did that, just hoping to start a conversation and maybe find someone else who lived in a place like mine with a lifestyle like this, who, didn't want to trade that for the city, but still had really big, ambitious, intentional dreams for what life could look like. And it turns out there were a lot of us.
Yeah.
And so to fast forward, a year later, I left my job that I thought was going to be like my next forever career, into the world of entrepreneurship. And I came into it assuming I would do something related to like goals and habits coaching, and quickly just found myself in a place of craving community, feeling not crazy in the pursuit of the dreams that I had on my heart. And so I started building mastermind communities and doing coaching and speaking along the lines of what does it mean to pursue personal growth in a small town? What does it look like to build businesses in a small town? What does it look like, to be intentional and parent differently? And so that winding ride ultimately led me on the fast track to burnout. Because surprise, surprise, third career, why would I not do anything differently? Which got me in therapy for the very first time and confronting, like I said, that approval, achievement, accolade addiction head on. Really starting to untangle and unweave, why I was doing the things that I was doing in the first place, who they were for, what my intentions behind them were, and ultimately introduced me to different healing modalities, different ideas, getting, in touch with nervous system regulation, getting more in touch with the body, the idea of like the body holds the score, getting into energy work, which, then kind of paired along the same lines of, or the same timeline of asking deeper sets of questions. At this point, I had been coaching for several years. I'd been working with women. I'd been hosting retreats. I'd been sitting in really deep, hard conversations and kept seeing this through line of why are these brilliant, passionate, purpose-driven women struggling with confidence, doubting themselves every step of the way, feeling insecure or disconnected. And so that kind of led to this really messy unraveling of asking why and starting to look at, our religious, political institutions, like how our worldviews are cultivated and shaped, how our nuclear family of origin and these other people in our lives throughout our childhood and adolescence ultimately shape our self-perception, and the way that we move through the world, which then, just kind of as you follow rabbit holes, as I know we've talked about all of our many, many curiosities, I just started to explore and ask more and more questions and become a student and a sponge, which led me really to unpacking spirituality, ancestral healing, colonization, the divine feminine, like going down all of these different paths. And so long story short, I went on the pipeline of personal growth and health journey to spiritual awakening.
It's amazing. You've done so much. Like what you just rattled off, Emily, is years of hard work and like really looking deeply at yourself and being honest and breaking and shaking a lot of
Mm.
scripts.
Oh my gosh, so many. I
That
feel like I have lived a lifetime in the past 5 years.
it sounds like it because that's a lot of deep work to be doing. I am so proud of you. I'm sure it feels amazing. Like from where you started, like, and then you think about your DNA changes like every 7 years, and it's like you're 2 years away from like not even really knowing that Emily. Like,
Yeah,
how does
it's
that
so
feel with
crazy.
your friends and your family? Like, do they feel that? Like, who is this girl?
Oh, that's such a good question. Such a good question. And I think anytime we're on any kind of growth journey,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a business growth, personal growth, like spiritual growth, whatever this looks like, a lot of times in the moment, it feels kind of insignificant. I noticed this with like my masterminds, right? Like, oh, what do we actually get out of like each call? Or what's actually happening? Or I don't feel like I'm getting any clarity. I maybe don't feel like I'm getting there. And then like retroactively, 6 months later, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, I am living in a different brain. Like so much has changed in 6 months, right? And I've had that 6 month period now over the course of almost 6 years.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many like benchmarks I can identify over those periods of time where like the way that I feel about myself, the way that I move through the world, my belief system, my like deeply inherited worldviews shifted in real time. And now, like, I have so much love and compassion and empathy for the version of myself 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, right? Because every piece of who we've always been has brought us to the people that we are today. But I look back, and have those moments of like, what if I hadn't said yes? What if I hadn't leaned in? Like, I would be experiencing a completely different reality. And that doesn't even necessarily mean fundamentally a lot of those like checklist things in my life have changed, right? We still live in the same house. You know, I still have the same kids. I still have the same husband. Like my job has changed, right? But the way that I move through the world, the conversations that I'm having, the depth of my relationships, the especially relationship that I have with myself, like I can almost see completely split parallels of the way that I live now compared to the trajectory and the reality I would have existed in had I never walked down that path.
Can we get into just one? Like,
Sure.
what's one expectation, whether it's like faith, politics, motherhood,
Mm.
society, that you've had to unlearn to live more in line with Emily?
Mm. I think yes to literally all of those. But what it actually has come down to for me and for the women that I'm doing this work with now is ultimately the way that we know, love, and trust ourselves. And I think about the decades of my life that I spent in negative self-talk
Mm.
or doubt or wearing so many masks that I didn't even know were
Yeah.
there, or within, walls and cages that I didn't even know had been built by myself, by people around me, that I had just like accepted. And like now, like negative self-talk does not rarely cross my mind,
That's
right? Like I have such a deep trust with who I am. I have such a deep knowing of who I'm becoming. I have like let go of so many of those expectations and conditionings and chains that have showed up from everywhere, right? Politically, religiously, motherhood, beauty and body industry, right? Like all of these different things. Like I don't drown in those expectations anymore because I feel so rooted and grounded with who I am and the way that I move through the world and have even in this really messy year the 2025 has been for me personally, it has come as the result of like being willing to sit and befriend the depths of myself and knowing that I'm not in a hurry to figure things out and that, I can still be actively taking steps towards the things that I'm passionate about and the things that I want to bring to fruition. But I no longer live in this like captive mentality of like, I have to do this right now or else I am a piece of shit.
right. That sense of urgency. I mean,
Yeah.
Emily, what you're getting back to is what you recognize in other women, that lack of
Mhm.
confidence, right? Like
Yeah.
negative self-talk will take up a ton of space if there's not this confidence, right? Or
Hmm.
insecurity. And to your point, that takes a lot to break because it's this good girl conditioning
Hmm.
of just appeasing everybody else. And I think it's easy
Yeah.
for us to lose who we are
Hmm.
through that.
Right. Well, and I think especially over the past year, the more that I've systemically started to understand where that comes from, the easier it has been to let it go, right? Because when I first started kind of doing this work of self-worth, of confidence, like it was very mindset, very psychological, right? And then I kind of got a little bit more into the body and that was great and helpful. But when you really start untangling the patriarchy, like the, religious programming, the expectations, capitalism, right? Like there's all of these different umbrellas that we can talk about individually. But when you take it back thousands of years, like there have been very specific things that have been done to disconnect women from themselves and people in general, right? But speaking from my experience and my research and what I'm passionate about. And so it's like once you start realizing that this is like not an accident, it's very systemic and it's multi-generational, and it's not as simple as just like deciding that there's so many layers to unpack and unravel here. It to me has kind of felt like each one is like a chain that has like set me free.
Mm,
It's like, oh, okay, well, someone else, of course I was feeling this way, right? Because I think sometimes like a personal growth journey can become like a dangerous cycle of also not enoughness. Like,
yes.
oh, I just need to fix this. I need to heal this. I need to learn this. Like, I'm so broken. I'm so wrong. Once I read this book or listen to this podcast or figure this thing out or set this habit or optimize my time, then I will be good. Right. And that's very much, to some extent, the reality that I was living in like 2019, 2020-ish. But once you start really systemically understanding where those expectations were even curated from, the easier it has been for me to be like, I don't actually have to buy into that. Like, I don't actually want to do that anymore. Like, I don't think that that aligns with who I'm meant to be or my soul's purpose or what my journey is. Like, I think I can put that one down, or I can get to the root of where that comes from, or I can do, different types of healing work to like actually release that. And it's not that it always necessarily forever goes away. I believe that our growth and our healing and our evolution is very cyclical in nature. But even for me, when like things present themselves again, the way I'm able to move through them is with so much more ease than a year ago, 2 years ago,
Yeah.
3 years ago, 4 years ago.
That's wonderful. I mean, you talking about like religious systems and patriarchy and everything, right? It's like I'm reading right now, I'm in a book group on Mary Magdalene Revealed,
Mm,
and 10 pages in, you realize, yes, yes,
yeah.
you realize there's not a single female perspective represented in the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that book, I remember listening to it. I had like a speaking engagement. I was in the car for like 8 hours for. So I spent most of the time listening to that book. And it was like answers to questions I didn't even know I was asking
Yeah.
and truths that I was just like, well, yeah, like I've always known that. Like I didn't have the language for it, but I've always known that. That book,
It's been awesome. I'm in this book club and we've met twice and we're like 40
mhm,
pages in, but I'm telling you 10, not even to page 10 was a stopper where I was like,
yeah,
whoa,
mhm,
how did I never realize that there's not a single female perspective? Like, don't we think that Mother Mary, not even Mary Magdalene,
mhm,
like Mother Mary, Jesus's mom's perspective would be, I don't know, remotely
mhm.
reasonable to consider?
Yeah. Yeah, and in I don't know how far you are into the book, but in, completing that book and doing further deep dives on the other side of it, it's like, oh, even the Bible that we know today is fabricated.
Yeah.
It
So
has been like systemically altered at certain periods of time to meet the agenda of whomever wanted to be in power. And so it's like, okay, well, even if this thing that we're like saying is capital T truth is like very curated versions of the truth, then anything can be true. What else is there?
yeah,
What else could be true? What came before all of that?
that was one of my prerequisites. It's like I can't move forward with this book if it doesn't address the Apocrypha. And it
Hmm.
did in the first 10
Hmm.
pages. And I was like, okay, I'm game to keep going
Yeah.
because that's to me something that, like to your point, is a truth that needs to be acknowledged. That's like
Hmm.
this has been misrepresented.
Curated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, so going in the theme and the spirit of women, and you alluded to this already, and gather and
Hmm.
growth, like having
Hmm.
kids, and this has completely resonated with me. Like kids shakes you up.
Hmm.
Nothing seems important once you're responsible for these little humans.
Hmm.
And you're pregnant
I am.
with a
I
daughter,
am. I
with
am.
her. And I remember this, Emily, like I felt like my daughter was my first in 2016, and being pregnant with her, I felt like I started, to your point, going down these rabbit holes and looking
Hmm.
into so many things that weren't even on my radar before children.
Hmm.
And then, 2 years of that, and then I have my son, and I go a little bit deeper and
Yeah.
dive further. And then fast forward to last year, I had a home birth with my
Mm,
third. And Emily, like it's interesting because our journeys, I feel like, are parallel in the pregnancy realm, but also like complete opposite because
yeah.
I was pregnant with a little boy and my dreams were all about war and violence. And I felt this need to kill like so
Mm,
like I started to get into hunting because I just was really like, I need to get out of nature and kill things. And I never actually did, but I was in camo out there like trying to figure it out. And I felt like his energy, like this
mhm.
warrior type, like I don't know, you might be dealing with some of this too. It's like, why do you keep having kids when it's a time like this? And my response to that is always like, the world needs the light from our
Yeah.
children. And like, I
Mhm.
felt like my son was embodying that and like had this warrior spirit that I was like, we're going to go tackle things. And
Yeah.
you're living a very opposite experience. But I would say, from what I've been seeing from you, your daughter is already pushing you
Oh my gosh. Oh
around.
my goodness. And you know what's so interesting? I would really like to read a book on this because it's been an idea that keeps representing itself. Is like the spiritual initiations we're meant to go through as women throughout our lifetime that are just like bypassed in our modern society, right? And one of them is childbirth.
Mm,
And obviously you have had multiple different kinds of births, so you have the juxtaposition between what they can look like. But the initiation that comes with each child and like the new version of ourselves, right? So often we hear moms talk about the way that they lose themselves in motherhood. And it's so often, I think, the more that I learn, it's like this disconnection from like what actually that transformation is meant to look like spiritually. My first, which is way before my growth journey began, born in 2017, on the other side of his birth was the first time I distinctly remember throwing everyone's opinions out the window and like trusting myself. We were exclusively breastfeeding, bed sharing from literally day one. Like all of this conflicting advice that I was getting, I'm like, no, no, no. Like, I know what's best. I know this baby threw us for so many loops and was like such an initiation into letting go of expectations and self trust, right? My second was what I told you about, kind of like just my collective awakening that brought me down this whole path. My third, who was born in October of 2023, I think around the time she was born or that I was pregnant with her was when I really started this kind of like unraveling everything journey, asking a lot deeper, bigger questions. And I thought that I was done with that. I thought 2025 was going to be like the alchemy year, right? Like I've learned so much, I've unpacked so much. We're going to do all this great stuff with it. It's going to be amazing. And then this May, I found out that we were pregnant again. And I scream sobbed. I
oh,
mean, sobbed for 30 minutes. I'm violently shaking. And I think it's because my body, my spirit knew how hard this season was going to be. Not that we're not so grateful and we're not so excited to meet her and complete our family in this way, but it was like getting kicked into a canyon of a death portal this year. It's the sickest I've ever been. Um, in ways that, and I've been pregnant before. Like, I know what it feels like to be tired and to be
right.
sick, but like debilitating, depressing, horrible, horrible, horrible times. But this baby has been the craziest spiritual initiation. I could probably record an entire 45-minute episode of like the amount of people who have very randomly, like, not even connected to each other with no prior context, come into my circle since this summer with like messages about and from and through my baby.
Mm.
Um, it's like she brought me into Reiki attunement, like two different mediums and spiritual healers, Akashic record, past life regression work, and like it has been the period of like surrender. And like, I am just meant to move through this and be a sponge and be open and let people come in and guide me. And it's just been, it's been wild,
What do you feel?
wild.
feel like is the biggest thing she's taught you already?
Um, Surrender.
Surrender.
And this year, for a quite a long period of time, I navigated a lot of grief. Um, it started with we had like between my husband and I, three grandpas pass away within like a month of each other. And we found out we were pregnant right in the middle of all these funerals.
Mm.
But then really grief around identity, around expectations, around like really letting go of the pieces that were still hanging on for dear life to try to like prove and do and achieve and be. Grief around what, I thought this year was going to be looking like, what the next couple of years were going to be looking like. Grief around just a lot, a lot. So that, and just like the surrender to, and the trust of knowing, God, universe willing, I have so many decades on this planet to do this work. I don't have to be in a hurry for any of it. It has been such a lesson in like the death and rebirth cycle, and like embracing the seasonality of life and what that looks like, right? We are in fall, approaching winter, right? And for most of my life, I resisted that. Like I love hot summer. I love when the world is green. I love sunshine on my face. Like heat, humidity does not faze me, except for when I'm pregnant. And so obviously when it got like dark and cold and brown, I was like salty and bitter, right? But that's really so indicative of this hustle capitalistic expectation we have around productivity, and really for women being like blooming and bright and happy and sunshiny all of the time. And like when we are really leaning in to our nature, especially as women, as cyclical beings, like within a month, our cycle, the lunar cycle, and within the year, we are cycling through this death and this rebirth. And there are times where we're meant to be inward, and we are meant to be still, and we are meant to, plant seeds and lay dormant and face the shadows and be more in the dark and be nurtured. That is what all of 2025 has felt like.
Yeah.
And we just have to trust that in doing so, we are building the strong foundation for when spring comes and for when we are meant to be blooming again. But where most women especially find themselves in burnout is years, if not decades, of trying to be summer all the time, putting a smile on, being happy, ignoring the bad things, like pushing it away, the darkness, like, love and light and sunshine and rainbows. And then just like this continuous expectation of output, always growing, always doing, always producing, always creating. And so this year I was already starting to understand this before my pregnancy, but it was like, oh, you think you know what this means? Prove it.
Mm.
Prove it is what this year has felt like. And so, yeah, it's like this really interesting liminal space of knowing I'm in this kind of season, welcoming the darkness while also trying to not drown in it.
Yeah.
And having the trust in knowing that, like, on the other side of this, everything's going to be different. And I don't have to shame or hurry myself to get there.
Yeah. Spring's going to come. And just like morning's going to come, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For us, the biggest shift from moving from the farm or from town to the farm was that, like we named our farm Eureka Moon Farm. And so when you talk about the lunar cycle, right, like the moon represents the feminine, the sun represents the masculine. And you look at how that aligns in society. The sun dominates. What season is it? Well, it's football season. No, it's fall. Right. It's a slowing down. And then you look at things like, the seasonality I am obsessed with. I love talking about the seasons and sinking into the season, right? Winter, we're supposed to be home and hibernating and not doing things. And it's
like, I'm so pumped for winter this year. Like, bring it on.
Winter. To me, that's when I get my crochet out and it's like snuggle up and crochet. And like, it's just so fun. And it's more sleep and rest. And that's what we're supposed to be doing, right?
Right.
We're not supposed to be working on New Year's resolutions in January.
Right.
Way out of alignment, right? That's more of a spring thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the seasons are fun. Like the real seasons are fun to
Right.
into and figure out what does this mean for me? What does it look like to slow down? And
Yeah.
for me being on the homestead, right? It's like, yeah, you look at the homestead hustle and it's like go, 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 get that garden in the spring. And then you're
Mhm.
harvesting that garden and you're maintaining it. And then fall, you're harvesting and you're preserving. And winter, you're eating all your,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, I love the seasons, Emily. Like it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And so it's, we can apply that and just like know that as much as we go through seasons in the year and in the month, we also go through seasons on a day-to-day basis sometimes. And sometimes it's like a longer arc of seasons. I know before we hit record, you were talking about how this year has been so full of grief and hardship in other ways for you too. And it's like, I think there's so much power in letting that be and experiencing it and feeling it without this like pressure of like, oh, I should be doing this. I should be moving through it this way. I should be getting through this faster. I should be doing X, Y, and Z. I should be putting out all the podcast episodes. And it's like, but why?
yeah, no one's actually going to hold me to it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and it's okay if you miss every now and then. Yeah, but
Yeah.
what we were talking about before we recorded was this is the year of the snake. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, I mean, I don't know about you, Emily, but I don't know many people that haven't felt the shedding of the skin going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Oh, yeah.
getting rid of what's not working and moving on and getting that out. And like, I honestly don't know a single person that's like, this has been my year. Like, I think it's put everybody through the ringer and
Mhm.
everybody's got so much of their own stuff going on. And it has, I think, been a big year of grief for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's sad and exciting at the same time, right? Because saying goodbye to things is often saying hello to new things.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
opportunity. It's just, it's hard in the middle of it.
Well, and I think, a lot of that transformation comes from the willingness to lean in, that willingness to sit in the dark, that willingness, even going back to talking about deconditioning, unraveling, untangling, asking questions. The average person will not do that because it's hard, because it is rattling, because it is like deep identity work at your core and being able to look in the mirror and say, I don't know if I believe that anymore. I don't know if that's true. Like that really rattles your sense of safety, especially if you haven't created safety within self. And so, if you're on this journey and you are willing to lean in and willing to sit in the dark and willing to ask the hard questions, that's when I feel like this fruitfulness, this like totally altered reality, this like manifestation, this like different way of moving through the world is what lays on the other side of that. But it's like the willingness to be dormant and grieve and be in the winter and be in the unknown and sit in the dark with the promise that it's worth it because spring is coming on the other side.
And so we were talking earlier about how hard this has been the journey, right? It is hard.
Mhm.
But to me, Emily, to your point, just ignoring it or not diving in would be infinitely harder
Yeah.
than actually doing the work. So
Yeah.
I don't regret doing anything because I feel like that's where we push ourselves to be different and to change and to trust what's coming on the other side. I
Mhm.
mean, it really is, it's brutally hard for sure. I think you can attest to that too.
Yeah. But I
Um,
think there's a lot of peace in it. I mean, if you look at the people in your life who are really stuck in rigidity, in binary thinking, in like, this is it. There's nothing else that can be true. I'm right. Everyone else is, he's like double down on that. They're the most miserable. They are the least secure in who they are. And actually, there's like this false sense of safety in their belief system that is actually so fragile that the idea of something else being true is so threatening that it like produces fear and anxiety and anger. And so, yeah, it's one time when I was really in the thick of therapy, this was like 2021, 2022 ish. I asked my therapist one day, tears streaming down my face. Like, this is so hard. This is so hard. This does not feel like it's getting better. This does not feel worth it. Are less self-aware people happier? Because I hate this. And she laughed and she said, she kind of paused and she was like, yes, in some ways, there's something to be said for ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
There's something to be said with just like moving through the world and pretending like everything's fine and doubling down on what you've always known and never admitting fault, not looking in the mirror, not doing the work and not healing. But she's like, those are the people who really at their core are actually miserable. And when they get to the end of their life, are filled with regret of what they didn't do, of what they didn't say, of what risks they didn't take, of the relationships that were severed out of, fear and frustration. And so she was like, yeah, this is really hard right now. And it's also worth it.
It is. It makes you be like, oh, I hate that, right? Like I don't want them. I want to help them with that. But I think that one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, Emily, is like you can't help people that don't want to help themselves.
Mm-mm.
That has to come from within.
Yeah.
And they have to choose to want to dive in. And I think like in my episode with Lindsay, it's like there's just so much about like you can't make people do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like
the best thing you can do is do, and this is true whatever path you're on, right? But do the work yourself. Be a lighthouse. Invite, but like release the expectation that it's your responsibility.
yeah. And I think that I don't know how this was for you, but I feel like that's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
Because you so desperately want to bring people with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, especially when it's like the core people in your life, right? Your family of origin, maybe your spouse, close friend. And for me, like with growth and evolution being a fundamental part of who I am, like really like one of my core values, right? There is this massive tension that can build with the people in our life who have no interest whatsoever. Because it's not even about like the way that you're growing, but it's like, oh no, you're really going to double down on that. And that's hard. It's a really hard thing to wrestle within yourself. It's a really hard thing to wrestle with in relationships. There was someone who came on my podcast with him last year who shared, along these lines of like, the answer is not necessarily like cut out everyone that's like different from you or isn't growing in the same way or doesn't, value the evolution in the same way that you do. But like, what's the extent to which you want to participate in this relationship, right? Like the extent to which that you can care enough to love someone for where they are and who they are, without energetically getting sucked in like the pain and the frustration of their stagnancy or their unwillingness. Like what is the and it's going to look different for everyone and every person in your life, every relationship, right? But what is like the degree in which you can handle that and letting that be enough and having peace around it.
Yeah.
And I think that can apply to so many situations.
100%. And what we were texting about before we even got on, right, was curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where it is for me, right? Like I need to know that you're curious about things and that you have compassion and respect, right? And so we don't have to align on everything, but those three things to some degree need to be true.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about curiosity? Like, what was it for you that kind of, I mean, we talked about kids, but was there something that you just remember really stuck out as like, this just feels weird and I need to dive in?
Well, I think the through line question was like, why are we so disconnected? Where does this come from? Right? Or why really like how our worldview are shaped. Actually, it probably was even more of an entry point. My husband and I are kind of in this really interesting situation where we have people who are very close to us, who are very dear to our lives, to our upbringing, to our relationships now, who are like so far left, right? And we're just talking about politics here. Live in like Los Angeles, New York City, London, Chicago, very specific worldview, right? And then we have other people in our lives who are as, right-wing conservative MAGA QAnon as you could probably imagine. And so we were stuck here kind of in the middle of like seeing all of like this whole spectrum politically and the way people were communicating, what they were believing, what they were saying, right? And this is really before shit hit the fan within the past year and a half. And I just started getting really curious around like it's almost like I'm hearing two sides of the same coin here. And of course, you think the way that you do because of where you live, the people that you're surrounded by, the voices that you're listening to, the people in your community, the media sources you're following, right? And so I started to get really curious around this perspective of how our worldview is shaped, which then led to like inner dialogue, which then led to, untangling even more questions around that. Like, how does religion play into it? How does economics play into it? How do value systems, like how are those created at a really core level? And then how do people go through the evolution of changing them one way or the other? And how does that all affect the relationship we have with ourselves, with our immediate community, and with the world? And so I think that was probably a point where I just started to get more curious instead of like defensive or frustrated because it was so easy to get frustrated in these conversations on either side, right? Because I'd be like, you're not listening, or you're saying the exact same thing but opposite, right? We were kind of like dancing around here in the middle. I can't remember exactly where this comes from in my human design as far as whatever, doesn't matter. But when I found out that it is in my human design to have the ability to sit in just about any conversation and deeply understand the perspective of where the person is coming from, and that not everyone was like that. I was like, oh, like I just went through the world thinking I was flaky. Like I can't make up my mind because I kind of agree with everything, or at least understand where you're coming from, or like I get it, right? I believe like multiple things to be true at once. When I understood that was part of my human design, it started to make a lot more sense too. But I started to get really curious just around like the psychology and social science of it. And then like from a generational perspective, like where does this all come from? From a societal perspective, where does this all come from? And then how does this relate to the women that I'm working with and the way that they feel about themselves and the systems and structures and worldviews and identities and expectations and conditioning in which they were raised? And how does that support or juxtapose what they want to be doing, right? Because there were so many women I was working with who were so passionate, who were so smart, who were so like ready to take on the world with this goal, this dream, this idea, this vision, these changes they wanted to make within themselves or with the business or with a career, something like that, but were like paralyzed by clarity and confidence and feeling like they were crazy. And so it was just like all of these layers to understand and unpack, and then start putting the pieces together. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point, curiosity is just rabbit hole after rabbit hole, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
yes. Like, it's a slippery slope, right? Like what you think you're diving into.
Yeah.
It's like, and then I realized that was like my Catholic upbringing. And you're like, where did that come from? Right. And so,
Mhm.
I mean, I think what I feel from you is that like we're both good at like connecting our brains to many different points of like things that
Mhm.
we experienced or read or understand or know to be true. And I mean, I think to the average person or even just everyone's data points and things are going to look different, right? And to your point, they're going to piece their puzzle together on their own and
Right.
have a different puzzle at the end, but it's different data points and pieces of curiosities that start the ball. You were talking about, Emily, like the women that you work with now.
Mhm.
And primarily you're working with women like a rural revolution, if you will. Is that true?
Mhm. Yeah. I would say, when I started sharing online, obviously the person I was trying to speak to was women in small towns connected to agriculture in rural communities. And I got to this point in early 2024 where that started to feel like a wet, heavy sweater I could not take off fast enough because within myself, I was feeling this like visceral feeling of like, I don't belong here. I don't think that the normalized ideals that most people are living into align with like fundamentally who I am as a person. And if I said that out loud, everyone would be mad at me, right? Everything that I've created, I would disappoint so many people. I would, they would feel betrayed or they would feel angry or they would feel threatened or they would feel judged. And ultimately, it was like self-preservation of like, this deep rooted fear of rejection. Um, and so it's almost like I couldn't get it off fast enough. And, that was a period of time where I was, again, going down like this whole evolution, asking so many questions, like really expanding my circle outwards to new ideas, new people, like getting involved in like masterminds and networks that were outside of kind of this rural bubble that I was existing in as far as like my peer group online goes. And then what's interesting, what happened around the middle of this year was this like duh realization, right? It's always duh of like, oh no, there's actually a lot of women who live in places like this who are asking the same questions you are. And they also feel fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And they also feel like they don't belong. And they also are walking into the school gymnasium feeling like aliens. And they also are so desperately trying to find themselves in online spaces. But there's this growing juxtaposition between like what they are learning and the way that they're coming home to themselves and like the conversations that they're seeing. And that disconnect of their unraveling feels more scary and isolating than anything ever before, which is funny because when I started sharing, it was like the women who thought they were crazy because they had big goals and dreams and wanted to be intentional with their lives and no one else understood. Like everything's changing and nothing is changing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's so cool is the second half of this year has been like really coming home to that. And a lot of that came from like the groundedness I started experiencing within myself of like, I had done so much deconditioning and deconstructing and unraveling, and then remembering and reclaiming and kind of like rising into the truths that really resonated with me. And getting really confident and curious, or really confident around what I was curious about and having ownership over it in ways that felt very scary and threatening a year ago. And once I started to move more into that energy, and the more I started peeling back and sharing, I mean, if you look at the evolution of my podcast over especially the last 18 months, you can literally watch in real time me start to peel back the layers of the things that I was willing to talk about externally and internally, because I have like the guests I was bringing in and also what I was talking about in my inner world and solo episodes. You can watch me go through that evolution, which I'm so glad to have captured. And then once I was finally ready to stand in that, I got to just start inviting people in who were like, oh my gosh, me too, me too, me too, me too, me too.
Mhm.
Right. And so now, like, I have this space, and my community has always been so, valuing growth and curiosity and intellect and empathy, right? And I think I was just feeling so insecure myself and putting my own projections of what that meant. But it turns out that a lot of people were also ready for the journey and needed to be invited in to go deeper and to sit with the nuance and unpack and not have it all figured out. Like we exist in such a world where we feel like we have to have all the answers before we speak to anything, right? We don't want to be canceled. We don't want to say it wrong. We don't want to do it wrong. We don't want to be corrected. And I very much have created spaces where it's like, no, of course we don't have all of the answers. We're doing really messy, big generational healing work. We don't have this perfectly articulated. We don't have perfect understandings of it. We're trying to figure this out in real time, but there's so much think the best word I can describe is like an exhale that comes with doing it together and knowing like, oh, I'm not the only one. Like, me too is one of the most powerful phrases in our language. And women were always meant to be doing life together. We were meant to be asking questions together and telling stories together and, raising our kids together and living and working together. But we have become so hyper individualized that we try to process even the most confusing, hard, earth shattering things within our own psyche and then wonder why we feel so disconnected.
Yeah.
And then as we are rearranging, then we put all these projections on, oh my gosh, everyone's going to think I'm crazy. I'm so weird. They're going to think I'm weird and they're all going to hate me and they're all going to judge me. And then I'm going to be an outcast and I'm going to have no friends. And then we just like further put ourselves in these like little hermit shells. And so what's been so cool over the past couple of months is like recreating spaces with this intention of this what I call the wild and waking journey, right? This unraveling, this deep remembering of who we were before the world told us to be, this like reclamation of our life and our truth and our beliefs, and then ultimately rising into being the leaders who are going to go into our relationships, our families, our friendships, our communities, the world and beyond, and really usher in this like new reality and world and perspective that I think we're on the cusp of as a humanity, as a collective. And so it's been freaking amazing. It's like every fear that I had was valid and came from somewhere, and I had to sit with and I had to work through and I had to really learn to be okay with what if it all goes away?
Yeah.
What if everyone is mad at me?
Right.
What if I lose friendships, right? What if people talk shit about me on the internet? What if the other moms at school think I'm weird? Am I going to be okay? And that's where this willingness to sit in the depths and look in the mirror and befriend and get to know and truly love those like shadow parts of self have made me be able to be like, yeah, I am going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it's already hard, but like faking it is going to be harder. Pretending like this isn't happening is going to be harder. Just like making small talk about the weather is going to be harder. So often we feel like we're crazy. We're just first. And there is someone else who's ready and willing and eager and hoping for the opportunity to say, me too.
I
Me
love
too.
that. We're just first.
Just first.
Emily, that's so good. I asking you about women and egg and rural revolution, right? And like I grew up in a farm family on both sides. And
Mhm.
for me, this was one of the very first points of curiosity that I started to go down. And it was heartbreaking for me.
Mhm.
I grew up really with this belief that like we're feeding America and like that,
I'm not
we're
laughing at
stewards
you.
of the land. And
Mhm.
I still believe that to be true. And I hate that I feel like my grandparents and other farmers that I know that are really freaking hard workers were
Mhm.
almost duped to believe that that is true, right? When it's like,
Mhm.
really what I look at is like, actually, we're contributing massively to an obesity epidemic, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not corn that's edible. It's high fructose corn syrup, right? Like,
Mhm.
and it's just, it's not what we thought it was.
Mhm.
Happened for me, Emily, when I was following RegBri. I was not fit enough or ever desired to ride RegBri, which if you don't know what RegBri is, it's like the week-long bike ride from Iowa, like across.
Okay. Okay. I was gonna
And
say I don't know what that is.
I was working
Sounds
for an
amazing.
insurance company that sold bike insurance. And so I followed along the party for the whole week and I documented it. And I was just sick, like driving past CAFOs and just remembering as a child growing up and seeing pigs running around and cows out, and just thinking about why are they now confined? Like this doesn't make any sense. And now we're bringing them in and we're planting to feed them and then we're ruining the soil. And I that 1 week of work for me, I was so in my head about all of that that I just like left feeling like
Mhm.
I'm not super proud of farming right now.
Yeah.
Like, this is really hard for me. And I felt like the shift for me to the farm was getting back to, like, to your point, the remembering, the real roots,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
talk about in one of my very first episodes, like, my both sides of my family actually were kind of like the Laura Ingalls Wilders of the county that I live in,
Mhm.
right? And so it's very small town. It's very, like, this has been this way since the 18 frickin' hundreds,
Mhm.
including the grudges in place, you know? And I mean, even looking at that episode, Emily, I'm like, I was so proud to put that episode out. And now I'm really wrestling with, like, land, loyalty,
Mhm.
love, and, like, what are we doing? What are we doing it for?
Mhm.
You know? And
Yeah.
not asking if you have questions. I guess, like, when you're dealing with women in ag, are they waking up to that type of stuff? Or is it more just like their inner voice and, like, finding it? Or, like, what's the big wake up or
Mhm.
aha that you feel like these women are having?
It's so interesting that you bring this up. Um, because I feel like in so many ways, so many women I know are like waking up in different pockets, right? And whether or not they're like fully on the rabbit holes that we're on, right? There's like people who are challenging the education system and choosing to homeschool. There's, people who are really starting to think about like what we're putting in our foods and, the role that modern medicine is playing, right? There's like the people who, there's just like all of these different pockets collectively. And I think women are leading the conversation in all of them
Mm.
because whether or not they're consciously aware, I believe that women especially are leading the charge and just looking around and being like, this isn't working. Right. And I don't think we've quite gotten to the dots of like we're all on the same team and we're questioning like these massively intertangled like systems and structures, but I see it happening in pockets. And it's not always done in healthy ways or productive ways, but it's happening. And what I think is so interesting specifically about the conversations around agriculture is like it's really a mirror for the same thing we've been talking about this whole time. It's like there's the people who are willing and ready to ask questions of the systems, right? And my husband was like such a good leader for this for me before I was even on the journeys that I've been on. Like he has been in regenerative ag, soil health conversations for as long as we've moved back to the farm and like experimenting with all sorts of different things that at the time, especially, everyone was like, what are you doing? That's so weird. Like he was willing to be the topic of gas station farmer
Mm.
gossip conversation, right? He was willing for people to drive past his field and be like, what are the Russels up to? Like, what is going on? Right? He was willing to experiment and he was willing to fail spectacularly. And he was willing to admit that. And he was willing to get curious and really look at like each individual piece of land and within each individual piece of land, like what does this soil really need and how can we nurture it outside of this just like um kind of like script that we've been handed for the past couple of generations, right? And so it's been so cool to see the way that he has been leading a lot of those conversations or participating in conversations where people are having them. Um, and it's been incredibly cool. I feel like I've said cool 10 times, but it is super cool. Several years later down the road of like when we were experiencing drought in our area, like our fields were the last ones to turn from green to like looking sick, right? After super heavy rains where there's like massive, practically lakes in fields, like our fields are great. You could go walk on them the next morning, right? And so people who were really kind of like teasing him at best, resistant, or like downright criticizing him were starting to be like, okay, well, something's working. Like, tell me more about this, right? And so he, for me, has been such a beautiful mirror of like what is possible. And we're kind of in this really interesting place where like we are still operating in conventional ag, right? We're not homesteading. We're not, shepherding the land in the same way that we would have a couple hundred years ago, right? We are farming 1,500 acres. And so I think a lot of times going back to this binary thinking, it's so easy in an industry to be like, no, this is the way we did it, and this is the way that grandpa did it, and so we're going to keep doing it. Like, what? It's not really working.
Right.
But then I see, especially the women I work with who are in the ag industry, maybe working in agronomy, in seed, in crop insurance, things like that. Like they are changing the conversation and they bring like different nuance and care and questions in a way that like people are starting to pay attention and listen. And so much like you and I kind of have talked about like how culturally, collectively, we're on this like cusp of awakening. I do think that there's a lot of conversations that are happening within the ag industry with the people who are willing to have them because it's straight up not working anymore. Inputs are higher than ever. Like the ag economy is a fucking train wreck. And like it used to be, well, if I just work really, 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 really hard, like good things will happen. We'll save the farm. We'll keep going. People are more burnt out than ever. Farmer mental health and suicide is astronomical. Kids aren't wanting to come back to the farm. Like our generation and even below us is starting to come back with like new ideas and questions and like not wanting to live that lifestyle of like farm, 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 work, 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 work until I just like burn out and die.
Right.
Which is what has been happening, right? And so I do feel like there are a lot of conversations happening. And like anything, I think it's going to be a slow evolution. Really significant change typically is, unless there's like harsh reasons to adjust quickly, which I think we're seeing expedited in the past couple of years. But again, I think it goes back to like who's willing to sit in the discomfort of not knowing, who's willing to admit that they were wrong, who's willing to admit that they don't know and that they have to dig deeper and ask harder questions and they can't just do what's always been done before. And then who are the people that are going to double down until their last day?
Yeah.
And so I don't know what the future of that truly looks like, but I think we see these like running parallels between politics, education, healthcare, the ag industry as a collective, and really just like food in general. And they're crumbling. They are crumbling with Band-Aids and covering up bullet holes, right? Across the board. And so it's like, how much do we keep just letting them crumble before they actually finally do? And I think we're closer to that than we have been, especially post-COVID. Like that was like really made us look at the cracks. And then they just kept cracking and we took that opportunity and threw it out the window. But I don't know. I don't know where we go from here. And I will say I do attract a specific type of person who's like willing to ask hard questions and sit in nuance and dream differently than a lot of people around them. But those are the leaders. Those are who's going to shepherd and change. Those are the ones who are already making incredible generational changes on their operations or with their clientele or with the customers that they're working with and the conversations that they're having and the advocacy that they're bringing to the state and national level. And so I have a lot of hope that we'll go somewhere, but that's all we can hold on to is hope, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's a good thing to hold on to.
Yeah.
Emily, I feel like if there's somebody listening right now that maybe hasn't had the courage to speak up or follow that curious pull or is feeling a nudge but is afraid to act on it. Maybe she's rural. Maybe she's not.
Yeah.
She's kind of feeling the call to question, to create, or to choose herself. What would you say to her?
There are many things that I could say. But on this line of curiosity, it's like, why not? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Right? I think, and a lot of this comes back to this like perfectionistic mentality that so many of us were raised in. Like, here's the rubric, follow the rules, do all of these things, get the A+, get the gold star. And if you don't know, then you fail. And it's like, but who cares? Like, we are meant to evolve. We are meant to change. We are meant to grow. And so if there's something calling you forward, and you're kind of getting trapped by fear, I think even just bringing that fear up to neutrality and getting curious around that, like, where is this coming from? Is this really my voice? Like, where did this voice begin? Who was the first person who told me this truth? And is it mine? Do I want to hold on to it? Okay, well, if the opposite of that truth feels too far away, can I at least be neutral about it? Can I at least accept the fact that I'm feeling this way? And then take like a little baby step. Like, can I listen to a podcast episode? Can I open up my journal? Can I read a book? Can I watch a documentary? Can I sit in the discomfort of hearing a conversation from someone who I know feels very differently about this without getting massively angry and offended? Right. And I think what is really important and what I constantly am reminding, the women in that I'm coaching at this point and who I'm doing like group program work with on this type of work is like, you don't have to believe every new thing,
Right.
right? Even like this group that I have, it's called the Coven, and there's people in all different spans of their curiosities and where they are in their journeys. And I'm like, there will be things that people share that brush up or blow past your comfort zone. And that's okay. You don't have to own it as yours. You don't have to believe it. You don't even have to get curious about it. You can say, that's great for you. I don't think I'm there yet. And I don't know if I want to be there.
Right.
But here's where I'm at. Right. And just like the invitation to be curious or to like when something feels really activating, triggering, whatever you want to say, like, why?
Yeah.
Why do I feel that way? Like, where does that come from? That's come up a lot in the Coven is like, wow, you shared that. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. But now that I am digging deeper into how I feel about it, I actually remember my priest talking about that through my whole entire life. And I actually don't think he was a very good person. And I'm not really sure I even want to believe that truth anymore. So maybe I am more open to that than I thought that I was, but I'm not quite there yet. I need to unpack some stuff over here first.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think just reducing the expectation that you have to have anything figured out and just allow yourself to be on the journey.
It's fun. A lot of times, though, to your point, when you're unpacking that and you're like, I don't know if I should believe this, it feels like I need to take a nap. Like,
Yeah.
I
And that's
need to like
okay.
really process and think that
Yes.
because it can be a lot. And I mean,
Yes.
that's that shedding of that skin again, right? Like that letting it all go.
Well, and I think sometimes we try to like hustle culture and checklist our growth too. Oh, well, now I feel like I need to deconstruct. Like, how do I do that? What are the steps? Like, can I get there within the next 3 months? And it's like, honey, just like take a deep breath and start asking questions and listening and like let your belief system rearrange itself. Like, there's no timeline.
Yeah. You
There's
don't
no
get gold
timeline.
stars, you do. Like, or
No.
right? Like it doesn't matter.
Like, if we are always going to be evolving, then you are always going to be evolving. So, like, you don't have to rush. Just like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
I love that. What is
Yeah.
the worst thing that's going to happen? Or, I mean, even flipping it, Emily, like, what's the
What's the
best thing that
best?
would happen
Yeah.
if I let that go? Right?
Mhm.
Like, what a freeing thought to
Mhm.
have. You
Yeah.
mentioned a handful of times, Emily, like belonging and
Mhm.
community. And I know that, like, there's a lot of people probably listening right now that are through the depths of what we all consider the messy middle, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really feel like you belong anywhere. It can
Yeah.
feel very lonely. So, would you mind talking about that for a second? Just like, how long did it take to feel belonging? How did you
Mhm.
create community? What does that look
Mhm.
like now? Where did you find it?
Oh, that's so many good questions. And I'm sure you're laughing at me. This baby is like in my rib cage. Oh my gosh. Get out.
Fun.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Because I think when you're on a journey like any that we have talked about today, sometimes the spaces where we used to feel belonging suddenly don't feel safe. And it doesn't mean they're always going to feel that way, but I think there's a lot to be said with when you're going through some sort of evolution of doing so along people who get where you're coming from or who maybe are further along or having similar conversations to what you're having. And so from the most simple terms, we can find that in books and podcasts and whatever. Then, there's kind of like the next entry of like, okay, who are you following? Like, what kind of conversations are you engaging on online? What Facebook groups are you a part of? Like, who are you engaging with on the internet? Okay. But that's still kind of like, I don't want to say superficial because it can be really meaningful. But I do think there's a lot to be said with getting really intentional with community in a level that often requires some sort of investment, whether it's a group program. Going retreats have been incredibly transformational to me, right? Whether it's working with a coach, a healer, some sort of mentor, just being able to really get into a space where you have one or more people who are like normalizing the ideas you're trying to understand. And whether that's like starting a business or deconstructing or whatever it might be, right? And I think sometimes we have this resistance to like, oh, I don't want to pay for my friends. Like that feels superficial. But like since the beginning of time, well, not since the beginning of time. Let's rearrange that. For as long as I've been alive, like there is some sort of exchange that happens for community, right? Whether it's time, money, energy, right? We have country clubs, we have workout classes, we have book clubs, we have signing your kids up for sports, right? Um, when you want to be a part of something, there is some sort of like transaction involved in it. Again, whether it's time or money or energy. And so, like, it is okay and safe to invest time, money, and energy into things that nourish your evolution and nourish your growth. And you can do that in whatever capacity is safe for where you're at right now. But I do know there's something to be said with like, the more skin you have in the game, the more there's like a higher level of buy-in of everyone who's there, right? It's like the difference between like a free Facebook group with 20,000 people in it versus being a part of like a 10-person high-touch mastermind or something like that. So I think that can be really powerful. And then I think one thing that I'm really leaning into over the next year is in-person community. And really redefining what that looks like in terms of, the things that you're thinking about. Because again, going back to projections, we think, oh, nobody gets this. I'm the only person in my zip code. I'm the only person in my town that cares about this. If people really knew that I was diving into this, everybody would hate me. And it's so funny, the number of people, and I'm talking local, as in like an hour-long radius or so. Like there are people within arm's reach of you who are ready to have the conversations that you want to have. But sometimes you have to get a little creative about finding them. And then you find one person who knows someone else, who knows someone else, who knows someone else. So one thing I really desire over the next 6 months or so is like, what does it look like to, invite people into my space, whether it's like for a coffee or a breakfast or a really beautiful dinner or a just like come and hang out and meet other people who are having these kinds of conversations. And like letting go of the expectation that it has to look a certain way.
I love
Right?
that. That's really good.
Yeah. Because, okay, just even specifically talking about religion, a lot of times, especially in towns like the one I live in, community is built into the church.
Mhm.
And whether or not you actually belong, whether or not you are actually safe there, right? And every institution is different. Every church is different. Every community is different, right? But you have a place that you're regularly going to, people you're regularly interacting with. You maybe break off into small groups. There's like a meal train when someone has a baby, right? Like it's kind of community is integrated into that. And so if you are detaching from that specific environment, or maybe detaching from friendships that no longer feel aligned, not even in the religious context, detaching from things you used to super be into that you're not anymore. I even think about this like for like 8 years of my life, my entire social reality revolved around drinking, right? I was in college and then Andrew was in college. He was in the military before he went to undergrad. And so like, all right, we had a robust social calendar, social group. We had great, incredible friends, beautiful relationships. That it was all centered around going out, going to the wineries, going to bars, right? Then when we moved home, that just wasn't a priority for us anymore. And I immediately got pregnant. And it wasn't necessarily a lifestyle we wanted to continue. We were already kind of reconsidering what the role alcohol played in our life was. But we're like, how do we make friends here
Right.
without going to the bar or trying to go to somebody's garage party? Like, we're not interested in that, right? And so anytime you're like going through some sort of transformation, it can be really jarring to lose your sense of safety and community. And so a lot of times I think we get really stuck in the nobody gets me, nobody understands, nobody likes me. And we're just like waiting for someone to knock on our door and be like, oh my gosh, Emily, we have been waiting for you. Will you please come in? And it's like, well, sometimes we have to go first. Sometimes you have to invite a mom to coffee. And sometimes you have to host a party. And sometimes you have to go to book club or you have to put yourself out there and join a class. And I know that gets harder. Like, the more kids you bring into the mix, I'm like, LOL, me joining a workout class, like when, right? But again, like sometimes you have to go first. And you have to be willing to be okay if it doesn't pan out. Right? Not every relationship, not everything you try is going to be a home run. But if we're still getting really trapped in the insecurity of rejection, like that will really hold us back from ever doing anything. So it's like, experiment, try, put yourself out there. I think looking ahead of what I think the next couple of years are going to look like, community, in-person community, community care is going to be more important than ever. And I'll admit, like, that has not been something we've been super good at nurturing ourselves over the past couple of years, just in raising kids and doing life. Like, I have incredible virtual community, but like some of my best friends live across the country and they're beautiful relationships, super deeply connected, but like not the same as sitting across the table from someone and being able to like be in their energy and space on a regular basis.
That resonates because it feels like too when you're doing this deep work that sometimes you just need to shut the gate or just like it's like now's not the time, right? And it's like I just need to focus on myself here. But to your point and what we were talking about earlier too, it's like maybe we're doing this work now so we can be more in a community-led space when it is the time for others that are going to start going through it. So I think that's beautiful, Emily, and I think you're right. And it's like, yes, could we all be doing better at that? Absolutely. But I think, and I've wanted to say this a couple of times because, you know, my background was in innovation and there's this whole mindset in innovation of like, fail fast, fail forward. And I'm just like, why? Into your perfectionistic, like you've brought this up a couple of times, right? Like this good girl script, A pluses, and we're perfectionists. Why does it have to be considered failing at all? You know, like it's learning in its purest sense. Like it's not necessarily a failure. So it's not like an F means you don't get this. It's more just like, what did I learn here? And so I think just to not be afraid of learning. Love learning. Dive in.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's also important to say of like, not every relationship in your life needs to have the exact set of beliefs that you do. And I know that's really hard, especially when you're in this like journey of unraveling and unpacking and trying to understand. By all means, you certainly need mirrors to you know, feel secure and safe in that. But again, it's like breaking out of this like us versus them, this binary thinking. You're either 100% with me or you're, you know, 0% a part of my life. And it's like being able to look at the value relationships that you do have and like what's the extent in which I can participate them and they still feel good, and knowing that I'm not going to have conversations about the erasure of the divine feminine with this person, and that's okay, right? I'm like maybe not going to put on the tinfoil hat for this conversation, and that's okay. Like I still love this person for who they are and where they are in their journey, and like that's okay for the role that they play in my life and the role that I play in theirs. Like we have somewhere we can meet in the middle somewhere. And I have other people who are nourishing some of those like really deep soul searching conversations that I need to be having. But not putting the expectation on everyone you interact with to like meet you at the depths that you're at. Because people can only meet you at the depths to which they've met themselves.
Yes.
And
That's
that doesn't mean they're a bad person.
100%, Emily. I think that I'm glad you brought this up because I feel like this has been forgotten collectively since
It's
2020.
so hard.
It's
Yeah.
so quick to ride people off and name call and just X, Y, Z because one thing is said, where to your point,
Mhm.
could we just have a little grace and a little like,
Mhm.
well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I also don't necessarily need to argue that. And I don't
Yeah.
necessarily need to disrespect you and cancel you now, right? It's more just
Mhm.
like interesting.
Yeah. We don't have to talk about that ever again.
Move on from that, you know? And like,
Right. And I think that's different than being superficial, right? Because someone's gonna be like, oh, well, that's faking it. No. Like I'm rooted and grounded in who I am. And so it's almost like, okay, this is follow me here. When I was in the thick of therapy, I was having this like identity crisis leading up to an event that I was going to. I was going to be emceeing the event. A ton of my clients were going to be there. Friendships that I had made online over the years were going to be there. I also didn't know it, but I was pregnant with my third at the time. I found out the day after I got home. But I was like, like literally panic attack level spiraling out in anxiety leading up to this event of like, am I going to be everyone that they need me to be? Like, am I going to meet their expectations? I have all of these different buckets that are like, I'm working and I have these friendships and I have these client relationships and like, blah, what if I let everyone down and they're also mad at me? Anyway, and she did this really powerful exercise with me of like defining who I was at my core, regardless of any external circumstance. And then going through and like explaining and defining, but what is the energy that I bring to these different situations? And I don't actually change, but like the level of intensity might change, or like my volume might change, or my animation might change, right? Like if I'm emceeing on stage, it's going to be very different than if I'm like sitting next to my husband or like snuggling in bed with my kids, right? But it doesn't mean that I'm a different person. And so I think that that same idea can kind of apply to this idea of our relationships is like it doesn't have to mean that you're like not being truthful or that you're being fake or that it's superficial. It's just like what is the energy and depth in which this conversation or this relationship or this person like expects or requires or needs or that I want, right? Insert whatever word. And that doesn't mean that I'm different than who I am. It's just like this is the way in which I'm showing up here. And that's okay. Because you are so multifaceted. We are all so multifaceted.
yes. And I think to your point, you can play these different roles and still be who you are.
Yeah.
Because to me, the bottom line with all of that is just like respect for self and others.
Yeah.
That's really the part that's like, if that doesn't waver, then yeah, we can agree to disagree very respectfully, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I think it also comes back to this idea of knowing, loving, and trusting yourself. When you're grounded in who you are and you have that high level of security and self-trust, then you're not bending at the will of everyone else's expectations or perceptions of you. That's where I feel like we get so stressed. It's like we're outsourcing our self-worth to every single person we're interacting with. Like, no wonder we feel all over the place and insecure. So it's like, again, it has to come home to you and your intuition, your soul, your body, your essence, your being, and the way you feel about yourself. And then going off into the world and like knowing that you are enough for you and like other people's perceptions, interactions, expectations of you.
okay. Oh, Emily, thank you so much. I feel like you just have so much to share. You can tell you've really worked very hard on so many fronts over the
So
years.
many things.
I'm just so happy that you've come to share with me today and all of our listeners. I want to ask you one final thing because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like both of us are very curious, creative, and we create a lot of things. And I don't know about you. I mean, we were kind of talking about Instagram earlier, but like creating versus consuming. Like, how
Mm.
do you stay mindful of that? And just like, where do you feel yourself getting pulled into things that don't serve you or
Oh
maybe
my
just
gosh.
have to be?
This is an area in which I am not thriving this year. I will be fully transparent. I have been so sick in this pregnancy that I have spent the most amount of time laying down. And for most of it, like even reading a book was like too hard for my brain or body to process. So I have spent more time scrolling the stupid internet this year than ever before. Um, and I have a lot of feelings about that. In some ways, I'm like, I am informed. I am learning. I'm connecting with new people. This is not a crisis. This is a blip of time in my life. And on the other hand, I'm like, this does not feel good. This is not serving me. I could be doing literally anything and I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, I get really I'm like ADHD. Reels is like the perfect dopamine for my brain. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I like can't have TikTok on my phone for this reason. Um, Now threads I really love because I feel like it's like where I'm able to be a part of conversations I really want to be a part of and like stay informed almost to the point that it's overwhelming, but like I don't feel like we get information anywhere else. So I do really, 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 really love that platform right now. But on the topic of creation versus consumption, there's so much ideology around like create before you consume. And I totally agree with that. And also, this year has not felt like my year to create. It has felt like a year of being a sponge and learning and like kind of soaking it all in and letting it integrate before I like rush to do something with it or teach on it or create content around it. So that's been kind of like an interesting change for me in this season. And I'm also trying to figure out like what does creativity look like outside of content creation, for example? Like um, painting our house, like doing things like that. And I know for me, I am very, very recharged, grounded, and filled up by going on walks every day. It is typically like when all of my juices are flowing. And physically, I have not been able to. We just figured out this week that I have had severe hypoglycemia,
Mm.
um, which, only 10 more weeks. We just figured this out. It's fine. But I physically have not been able to go on walks most days. I've probably been on like 5 walks this whole pregnancy. And normally I'm like walking at least an hour a day. And so it's been this really interesting place. Um, but I'm trying to listen to more audiobooks than ever before when I have, free time and my brain can handle it. I'm still reading as much as I can. But I'm not gonna lie, like I have gotten just as trapped in this like consumption wheel that I feel like a lot of us struggle with. And I don't have a magic answer there, right? Like it should be as easy as just don't do it. Delete the app off your phone. Like, but it's
No,
also how I communicate with my people, right? It's like kind of for work. Yeah, it's not an area where I feel like this year has positioned me to excel. And I don't love that. And also, like, it does me no favors to beat myself up about it.
yeah, but it's a heavy pressure, right? Like to show
Yeah.
up to be there, and whether that's perceived or real, it still
Yeah.
exists, and that's hard. I've been dealing with that, and like
Mhm.
knowing that it could be more or that I could be doing more, I think
Mhm.
is like a construct to break when it's like, really, if the most important thing is me and the wolf pack and the kids, like shutting the laptop and just
Yeah.
is actually what I should be doing. And
Yeah.
like I haven't been afraid to do that, but at the same time, like the noise is loud. And I
Hmm.
mean, we hear that everywhere from social media, from motherhood, from society, from all the things. And it gets to be too much, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like I just need to be in my home and worry about what's in my walls. And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like it's okay to do that. And as long as
Yeah.
we convince ourselves that that's okay.
Yeah. It's hard. Well, and even in the world of, business or growing a platform or whatever, like there's so many places where we could pour our time, effort, and energy. And they all can work and they can all be good, but it's also like just throwing money in a slot machine. And so this year I've had to really pare down and be like, Instagram, not a priority. Um, I'm releasing a podcast every week. That's where I'm really having the conversations that matter. I'm sending out an email every week. I'm like pretty active on stories so that like, I'm just having conversations. And that's enough. And everything else is icing on the cake.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There will be another period of time where I will feel really energized to do something else. And whether it's on Instagram or a different platform or something else, like those juices will come. And it's not right now. And that's okay. I can't hold myself accountable to the standard of when I, started sharing online in 2020, 2021, and I didn't have, I wasn't pregnant and have 3 kids running around, right?
Yeah.
It's just, again, it goes back to that seasonality.
Life changes, and so does how you're showing up.
Life. Yes, exactly.
Emily, tell me this. Where should people find you? Where do you want
Yes. So speaking of, I am the most active on Instagram, although I'm not creating a lot of content. I'm there a lot. At Emily Reuschel, EmilYReuschel. Again, I've been having a lot of fun with threads. Been connecting with a lot of new people on that platform. A lot of my recent podcast guests have come from threads, so that's been really fun. So come say hi there. Recently, I feel like everything, every piece of content, every thread that I put out that actually does go viral is like related to me being pregnant, which is funny. I'm like, okay, whatever. Um, Otherwise, my podcast is called Wild and Waking. And so if any part of this conversation spoke to you, it's basically the summary of what we're diving into over there. So come say hi. My website is emilyrushel.com. This baby is so far in my ribs, guys. Oh my gosh. And otherwise, just stay tuned because I think really exciting things are coming on in my corner of the world. So if this episode found you and resonated with you, come say hi. I'd love to continue the conversation.
Emily, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad to be walking in parallel with you and
Me too.
have you on and have you share so openly and so much of your story. Thank you. Thank
Ah, thank you. I'm so glad we found each other when we did.
you. Same. Thank you.
Whoa. If you're like me, you might want to go back and re-listen to parts of that with a journal nearby. There's something about hearing another woman tell the truth of her becoming that stirs something awake in us too. Emily's journey is such a powerful reminder that living with intention doesn't always look tidy, but it always starts with listening to your body, your story, your longing. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. If this stirred something in you, send it to a friend who's on the edge of unlearning or becoming. And if you haven't yet, leave a review or a few words over on Apple or Spotify or my website review. It helps more rooted seekers, curious unlearners, and wild blends find my work. I'll see you next time on Wildly Intentional, where we're going to keep living, learning, and leading out loud and on purpose. This is Mandy, signing off. Until next time, stay rooted, be brave, and live wildly intentional.